Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition, and this week it comes from Tyrone Marshall of the Manchester Evening News, who covers Manchester City, the visitors to St James's Park on Saturday. Tyrone, welcome to the podcast. How are you keeping? You well?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. I'm good. I'm glad the international break is almost over.
Yeah, me too. But actually, it's been quite an entertaining one. I've enjoyed it for a long time. That Scotland game in particular was quite the highlight. And from a Newcastle point of view, we've had Nick Waldemar amongst the goals for Germany. So hopefully he can carry that goal-scoring form into Saturday's game, although I'm not confident he's going to get too many chances to do that. Manchester City then. I mean, I don't even know how to even approach this episode, if I'm being brutally honest about it. I am so negative about what's to come on Saturday. I really am. I just can't see any light at the end of the tunnel for Newcastle United in this game. You've got Manchester City in fine form. You've got a host of players playing at their very, very best. I mean, how are Man City going to approach this game? How do you think they'll be looking at Newcastle on Saturday?
I think they'll see it as a game. They'll see it as a difficult game, that's for sure. They've had a lot of difficult games up at St James's Park. It's obviously, that Saturday 5:30 game at St James's Park lends itself to a pretty loud, hostile atmosphere, I think. So they'll know from experience it'll be a difficult game. I think they'll be expecting a difficult game. I think they'll see it as an opportunity to win and close the gap to Arsenal to 1 point. It's very early to be kind of talking permutations and points difference and things like that. But I think the view is probably that the best way to win this league is to basically put the pressure on Arsenal. And the more you can do that, you should take every opportunity really to kind of crank up the pressure on them. And if City can win at Newcastle and close that gap to a point ahead of the North London derby, it'll be the first test, I guess, of Arsenal's mettle and their bottle. So I think City will probably see that as an opportunity. But I don't think there's any getting away from the fact that they will think it's going to be a really difficult game. And I would expect when Pep Guardiola does his press conference, excuse me, I would expect him to talk about what a good side he thinks Newcastle are and what a difficult place it is to go, because I think that's the general experience they've had in the North East there.
Yeah, he's always very complimentary about Eddie Howe in Newcastle United. And recent games at St James's Park have been quite close. I think everyone remembers a very late goal for Oscar Bob, I think it was. Newcastle got Man City. The result, Kevin De Bruyne came off the bench and totally changed that game, if memory serves me correct. But if you look at the stats, Tyrone, Man City love coming to St James's Park. I think it's 13 wins in the Premier League. That's the joint most victories away from home in the competition. And the last time Newcastle United beat them in the Premier League was back in 2018. They've lost quite a few games to Manchester City. What is it about Newcastle United and in particular St James's Park that City seem to enjoy so much?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. It's hard to put your finger on any one particular thing. I mean, I guess the reality is that for most of that time they've just been the better team, which they still obviously are. Yet they've not got that kind of record at other Big Six clubs, and I know Newcastle aren't kind of in that traditional Big Six, but the last couple of years that they all but have been really. You'd still class them in that sort of position. You look at City's record at Anfield, for example. It's not great. It's the opposite of not great. They've not won with a crowd there for a long time. So if they do, I guess you could say they do have issues sometimes where the atmosphere is against them and it's hostile, which is kind of what you expect St James's to be. But they do seem to always rise to the challenge. And as we say, that they have got a very good record against Newcastle. I think the games generally at St James's have been pretty close and have been difficult games, but they have come out on top. And yet, beyond just being generally the better team in that period, I'm not sure there's anything kind of specific that they enjoy playing against them. Obviously, the game at the Etihad was a funny one last year, and that it was a time when City, in a season where City struggled and they didn't produce many performances of that level, and then kind of brushed Newcastle aside with ease. But obviously, it's a different game at St James's, and City have kind of always risen to the challenge and risen to the atmosphere. You mentioned the 3-2 game there where Oscar Bob scored the late winner. That was it. I can't remember if that was an 8 p.m. kickoff on the Saturday or a 5:30 p.m., but it was definitely a late Saturday kickoff. And that, again, obviously, Newcastle were 2-1 up in that game with 15, 16 minutes to go. And as you say, De Bruyne turned it around. And, that was another one where the atmosphere was very loud. And City displayed, a lot of courage, I guess, winning that game in what was a big kind of run for them at that point, just after the Club World Cup and closing down Arsenal and going on to win that league. So they do seem to have always risen to the challenge and risen to the atmosphere at Newcastle.
I think if you look at Newcastle this season, there've been defeats very late on. And I know over the last few years, and Liverpool as an example, Arsenal this season, as we mentioned, that late win for City in that 3-2 victory. I think that is maybe a mentality issue for Newcastle United, getting yourselves into a good position against these world-class sides and then just being unable to get yourselves over the line, whether it's a bit of kind of fear amongst the fan base and within the playing squad. I'm not too sure, but there's been plenty of results which suggest that something just isn't quite there. And I guess that's the difference between being a very good side and actually being the best. And Man City clearly are the latter. There's so much talent in this City side. I mean, we could spend all day talking about just Erling Haaland, for example, and we will get on to him in a moment. But I'm really intrigued by Doku, who seems to have found his feet at Manchester City. He's been a joy to watch of late. Just how good is he, and how did Newcastle United stop him?
Yeah, he's having a really big season so far. I think probably maybe his best 3 City performances have all come this season. He really has taken his game to another level. It's always kind of felt like he's got the ability as a winger to really excite people. He's an old school dribbler, but he just couldn't put it together. And in a way, the 2 Liverpool games at the Etihad this year sum it up. The one back in February, I think he broke the record for the number of successful dribbles going past Alexander-Arnold, and City didn't score, and Doku didn't create anything with them. Whereas 2 weeks ago, he was brilliant again, and he scored a brilliant goal, and so many of his crosses could have been goals as well. He looks a more complete player now, and I mean, stopping him is very, very difficult, to be honest. You look at that Liverpool game, and it was 4 days on from everyone saying how well Conor Bradley had done against Vinicius and had basically pocketed him against that at Anfield, and then you just can't get near Doku, and that kind of shows the level he's at. I guess that it's even fullbacks who will be full of confidence, who've just had a great game against Vinicius, are finding it impossible to stop them. And the thing that fullbacks hate is someone who runs at them and someone who's skillful taking them on. So stopping him is a difficult challenge, that's for sure, because he is skillful and he's quick. But as I think Guardiola once said, he's the fastest player in the world over 5 meters, which I think was meant to sound more of a compliment than maybe it did. But basically it means, when he squares up a fullback and turns the acceleration on, he gets past them every time. And I think you can see what he's saying. If he breaks through from halfway, he maybe can't sustain that pace to kind of stay clear. But if he's got the ball on the edge of the box and he nudges it past the fullback and runs, pretty much every time he beats them. And when you can do that, and then you start delivering dangerous balls into the box, it does make you a different proposition. So he does look a real threat at the moment. And City have badly needed it. You mentioned Haaland there, but beyond that, there's not a lot of goals in this team, and it does kind of need the likes of Doku and Foden, I guess, in particular, to really step up and I guess take the pressure off Haaland. I mean, he doesn't look like he's suffering from pressure and doesn't look like he's going to stop scoring, but if he did, then that would certainly be a problem for City.
You mentioned Foden there. He's another one who's rediscovered some form just at the right time for Manchester City, but England as well. I mean, we've always known how good he is, but maybe it hasn't always clicked for him, but it certainly is now. I mean, how key will he be, do you think, on Saturday?
Yeah, I think very, very important. He's playing slightly deeper for City this season. He's playing a central role. He's not on the wing anymore. He's kind of in the role everyone expected probably to make his own last season. And he came off the back of when they won the league in 23-24. He was the best player in the Premier League. He was voted the best player in the league. And he was the key man in City winning that title. And it felt like he'd gone to another level, that he had taken De Bruyne's mantle. And then last year it was disastrous for him. And he's been very honest talking about how he struggled on and off the pitch and how he had issues. He spoke really kind of openly after the FA Cup final about how he found it a really difficult season, and not just on the pitch, but had his struggles off it as well. And you could tell that he wasn't enjoying his football. And you look at him now, and he's a totally different player. And every time Guardiola gets asked about him, the thing he says is he loves it again. He's enjoying his football again. And the one thing you notice is that when he's on the pitch, he's smiling and his shoulders are back and he looks like he's enjoying it. Whereas last season, it looked at times like he just didn't want to be there and wasn't really influencing games. And with that, and kind of with that enjoyment of it now, has become this central role, this slightly deeper role. And he's running games at times for City. There's no getting away from it. I think he still probably wants to add a few more goals to his game. He did get a couple against Dortmund in Champions League the other week, which kind of showed, both of those finishes showed what a phenomenal player he was. Because if anyone's not watched them, they're worth seeking out, because they're both from outside the box, but he just makes them look so easy. It's incredible, really, and shows what a talent he is. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of Newcastle fans who won't share the sentiment, but it is nice to see him back like this and back playing like this, because I think on his day, he's probably the most talented English player there is, really. And at the moment, he looks like he is back in that kind of mood and back in enjoying his football. And I think that's the biggest difference between this season and last season, that he's in a better place off the pitch, and that's helping him enjoy his football on it.
I'm all for Phil Foden's return to form, just not this Saturday.
Not Saturday.
Go next week, fine, but just not this Saturday. Talk to us about Haaland then. I mean, what is it to say about him? It's kind of been said. He's just an absolute joy to watch. And on the match preview, we're talking about the best way to stop him. And I think the answer that we came to was kind of, you just got to pray, really. I mean, you could play with 3 centre-backs, but is that really going to do much? Then that would remove probably your threat going forward, or a bit of muscle in the middle. I mean, how do you stop Erling Haaland?
Pray, probably. I'm not sure there is a way to stop him. I mean, his record this season is absolutely incredible. I think, is it 32 or 33 goals now? I think it's maybe 32 in 20 for club and country. It's beyond belief. And in those 20 games, there's 2 he's not scored in, which is phenomenal, really. It feels like a formality that he will score every week, because basically he does score every week. He's been amazing for City. He's been brilliant for Norway. And I think, he's taken on this leadership role this season. Guardiola put him in City's 4-man leadership group. He was Norway captain for their internationals just gone with Odegaard injured. And you can kind of see him thriving on this responsibility. One thing that's noticeable, which you'll probably see at Newcastle on Saturday, is that he's more influential in his own penalty area now, which is, when he's scoring the amount of goals he is a strange thing to say. But obviously, set pieces, long throws have been a big part of the Premier League season. And City bring Haaland back for them. And the number of headers he wins in his own box is incredible, really. And I think there's going to be spells, undoubtedly, on Saturday when Newcastle are winning corners and set pieces and long throws and testing City out that way. And Haaland will be back and winning them and taking responsibility. And it does feel like maybe leadership has taken him to another level. And I think the only other way to stop him is don't wind him up. I think, centre-backs, I think, quite enjoy the idea of battling against him. And a couple of times this year, in I think it was the win at Brentford. I think it might have been Christopher Ayer, but I can't remember for certain. But there was I think he said a Brentford defender who basically Haaland said he wasn't feeling it at kickoff. And like the first few minutes of the game wasn't really feeling into it. And this Brentford player just started pushing him and shoving him. And he was like, right, well, that's got me going. I'll have you now. And sure enough, scored a great goal and won the game. And I don't know if you saw his quotes after the Italy game on Sunday when he scored 2 late goals and brilliant win for Norway there. And he talked about how one of the Italian centre-halves started pinching his buttocks during the second half. And it just kind of like made him angry. And that was his response. I mean, maybe they scored those goals anyway, but it does seem from what he says that when centre-backs start engaging him in kind of pushing and shoving and trying to wind him up, it doesn't knock him off his game. It makes him more focused. So maybe the best way is kill him with kindness and just try not to chat to him and wind him up and get him going. But yeah, I don't know how you stop him. I mean, he is a cheat code at the moment. Like I say, it feels like there's the two City games he's not scored in out of 15 he's played this season. It basically feels like even before you kick off, they're gonna score once, because you know Haaland's going to score once, and the numbers he could be on for this year are incredible, really.
Yeah, they're scary. I mean, that story you're telling there about not winding them up. I mean, our listeners might think back to Alan Shearer playing against Grimsby in the League Cup, when he got an elbow to the face in the first half, and he came out in the second half and scored 2. And at full time, he said something similar. He said it would have been easy for me to kind of come out, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, but come out and retaliate. But what I did, I came out and scored a double. He had a lovely little cut lip. It was quite the ferocious elbow on the centre back. But I mean, on Alan Shearer, Erling Haaland is set to break his record in terms of 100 goals scored in the quickest time. I mean, it'd be quite fit in many ways, wouldn't it, to be doing at St James's Park, especially if Alan Shearer's not a match of the day, and he is indeed in his box on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it would, definitely. I think Shearer's probably fearing that a few of his records are going to go to Erling Haaland at the moment. I mean, that one, even if it doesn't happen at St James's, that one is going to go, isn't it? It was quite interesting that Haaland did the press conference before the Dortmund game the other week. He doesn't do many at City, but when he does, he's great value for a guy who's basically a superstar. He is incredibly down to earth, and he is very humble, really. And press commentaries with him are always engaging, because it feels like he doesn't give scripted answers. He's a really interesting, open guy, and will have a bit of a laugh at himself. But he was asked about records, and he was asked about Shearer's, and he did say, he kind of said, like, I don't pay any attention to records. I don't know them. Just about Shearer's 260, as in Premier League scoring record. And he did say, yeah, that's one I do know about. And it kind of gave the impression that, and he signed this contract that will keep him at City till 2034. I think if he sees that out, it feels inevitable, really. He's going to break that, even if he's still, 161 or so away at the moment. It's a hell of a lot of goals, but when you're scoring 1 or 2 every week, it's probably not that many, to be honest. I certainly wouldn't take him 9 seasons, I don't think, if he continues at his current rate to reel that record in.
Hopefully, somehow, Newcastle can keep him quiet on Saturday. For all we're talking about Man City's talents, whether it be team-wise or individual, there must be a weak link. Come on, there must be a weak link that Newcastle exploit.
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly what it is, but basically they're not as good as they were 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. You kind of saw bits of that last season, and yet a lot of that was down to the injuries. They had a nightmare with injuries last year, and Guardiola's always wanted to carry a small squad because he hates telling players they're not involved, and they paid for that big time last year. But it was clear there were other things as well that went wrong last season. They're back on track this year, but I still I don't think they're going to put together the kind of 15-game winning run that ends title races that they used to do when they were getting 100 points or mid to high 90s. They might get 90 points this year, but I don't think they're going to get 95. And essentially, they're just not as consistent. And it's funny, at the start of the season, they lost 2 of their first 3 games going into the September international break, and we were so negative because they'd lost games. They'd lost games that they lost last season, and they lost them in the exact same way at home to Tottenham and against Brighton. And it kind of felt like nothing had really changed. Excuse me. And since then, obviously, it's clear things have changed. They are back on track, but they lost at Villa, must be about a month ago now. And that kind of came out of nowhere. And it was a really flat, poor performance. And it was one of those games that kind of shows you that if you do keep Haaland quiet, you probably will win, because there's not a huge amount of goals elsewhere in the team. And credit to them, the way they've recovered from that Villa game is impressive. But I think they're going to throw games in like that on a semi-regular basis this year, which is why I don't think they'll win 15 in a row and burn Arsenal off. I think they'll maybe get to 88, 90. I think the best way they City win the title is by staying close to Arsenal and putting the pressure on Arsenal. So it wouldn't shock me if City turned up at Newcastle on Saturday and instead of producing the kind of performance they did against Liverpool, produced the kind of performance they did against Villa, just because it is still a fairly new team. There's been 10 new signings in 2025, so it is still a bit of a new team. I don't think they're at the level they were when they were reeling off 4 in a row and winning the treble So I think they're capable of those games where it just doesn't work and they lose 1-0. And in a way, I guess going away to Newcastle is probably of a similar level as going away to Villa. It's the kind of game where if you're not fully on it, you might well get beat. So, I don't think it's beyond Newcastle to win. And I think all City fans and everyone watching City is still like, yeah, there's very positive signs this year. But I don't think anyone will be surprised if, like I say, every now and again, they do just turn in a below par performance. Whereas 3-4 years ago, that didn't really happen and you had to be on your A game to beat them. Whereas maybe now it's not going to be the case every now and again.
Well, that was more positive than I was expecting. When I asked our Brentford guest about the weaknesses in the Bees starting 11, he just said there are no weaknesses, and it right on the day.
Proved to be correct, yeah.
But that's there's some sort of weakness. I did enjoy though what he just said. I mean, if you keep Erling Haaland quiet, then you probably will win. Just keep him quiet.
Yeah. It's easy to do.
Do you think there'll be a Newcastle United player that Pep Guardiola is particularly fearing? We know that previously he's been linked to Bruno Guimaraes and he's spoken and praised the Brazilian. Will it be him? Do you think maybe looking at Nick Valdemar is a bit of a challenge for the centre backs? Who do you think's be kind of the forefront of his mind?
Hard to say. I mean, I would say potentially Anthony Gordon. Is he fit? Is it a bit
50-50?
unknown?
We're recording this prior to Eddie Howe's press conference on Friday, and even then we wouldn't get a true answer, I don't think, from Eddie until the team sheet drops. But to be fair, a lot of people wouldn't play Anthony Gordon.
He's
not been up to scratch domestically for Newcastle. Champions League, fantastic. England, brilliant. And this is kind of the game that actually you wouldn't be surprised if he played and did very well. It's the games against West Ham or Brentford. He didn't feature that one, but that he just hasn't put the performances in. And if you ask 100 Newcastle United fans, I think it would. I would admit the bet it would be largely weighted to Harvey Barnes starting on the left.
Right. Okay.
So, you might have to pick someone else.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was just thinking that. I mean, if City have got a weakness, it's maybe at right back. I mean, Nunez, to be fair, has been really, really good the last 6 weeks, but he is still essentially a midfielder playing right back, and there's certainly a defensive weakness there. And I think if you had someone like Gordon, who is quite direct and running at him, could put him on the back foot. Waltemard is a possibility. I still think Pep would fancy Guardiola and Diaz to kind of handle him. And I mean, maybe the big one would be Guimaraes. Like you say, City have clearly liked him over the years and wanted to sign him. And I think he's the type of player who, if you let him get into the game emotionally as well as kind of technically, he can kind of run it and control it at times. So I think that's maybe the type of player, and especially when City are going to be without Rodri, and as they spent most of the season without Rodri now, and I think they're probably going to spend most of the season without him at his best. Nico Gonzalez has stepped up the last few weeks, but if you're looking at kind of a Guimaraes-Gonzalez battle, you'd fancy Guimaraes more than you would in a Guimaraes versus Rodri battle when Rodri's at his best. So that might be, and that midfield for Newcastle might be an area that he's looking at and thinking we need to kind of win that midfield battle.
I mean, just across the board when it comes to City, I mean, is the best way to have any success against them, is it to sit back and absorb and then hit them on the counter, or is it to do that high press? What's the secret?
Yeah, I mean, probably still sit back and absorb and try and break on them. I would say try and break at speed on them. I think is still where teams get the best joy. You kind of certainly at the start of the season, it felt like, I mean, Tottenham did that pretty well at the Etihad. The Brighton win when Brighton beat them earlier this year was very similar to the Brighton win last year when Brighton went 1-0 down, but soaked up a lot of pressure, and then kind of midway through the second half, upped the intensity levels, and it felt like City just couldn't cope. We've not seen that really happen since then, but that was kind of a running theme last year, that City would have spells where they were totally dominant in games, and for 30 or 40 minutes, it looked like they'd blow the opposition away. Then the opposition would find a strong 10 or 15 minutes, really up the intensity, and City would kind of collapse. And that's probably one thing Newcastle can do, especially at St James's Park, where it's almost worth trying to play in spells. And like say, you try and keep it tight for 30 minutes and then go into a blitz for 15 minutes towards the end of the first half and see how City cope with that, and maybe do the same midway through the second half. That at the start of this season and last season, that was a weakness. Like I say, it doesn't really feel like we've had it as much recently. Maybe there was a bit of it at Villa, but I think that's certainly an area to go at. Like you say, you're not, Newcastle aren't going to turn up at the James's Park and dominate City from the off and dominate the ball. So it's probably better to kind of play in spells, like say, where you sit back, you try and soak up a bit of pressure, and then rather than counter-attacking every 5 minutes, try and build up to these spells where you just raise the intensity and raise the energy and see how City cope with that.
For me, that's fine. I think that's when Newcastle United are at their best at this moment. We want to see them as a team that takes more control home and away, but I just don't think they're at that stage at all. So if they can sit back, soak up the pressure, get the ball out to the midfield and to the wingers with Waldemar pushing up a little bit further, then hopefully they can take their chances, which of course, they're not going to have many, and that's the other thing. They're going to have to be absolutely clinical. That's sometimes escaped them. Although Waldemar has had something like 6 shots and scored 4 goals. So, he can be clinical if he gets the chance, and then hopefully he does get the opportunity. In terms of a score prediction then, Tyrone, how is this one going to go?
I think City will win. I think City will edge it, but I don't think it'll be easy. I mean, Newcastle are having a very strange season, aren't they? But you look at their home form, and their home form looks really good recently. So, I think it's going to be difficult, but I think City maybe edge it 2-1.
Okay. Well, I did say in the match preview that we recorded prior to you popping onto the show that I was expecting a bit of a thumping off Manchester City. However, having spoken to you over the last 28 minutes or so, I feel a little bit more positive about it.
Not so much a service.
Yes. However, I still think they'll get beat. I just think Newcastle United are in a bit of a bad spell at the moment. They do tend to get up for games like this, but history shows that City are a bit of a bogey side and tend to beat Newcastle. Body language and kind of attitude wasn't there against Brentford. Is 2 weeks enough to fix that, given key players were away on international duty? I'm not too certain it is. So I could see City running away with this one. Maybe not as damaging as I originally predicted in the match preview. However, I still think City will win. I don't think it's going to be close. But hopefully I'm wrong, because every time I predict a result recently, it goes the other way. So
I can see what you're doing then.
Tyrone, thank you very much for popping onto the podcast and providing the insight into Manchester City. To you guys watching, do it thumbs up, hit subscribe to the channel, get into the comments, let me know your thoughts ahead of Saturday's game. If you're listening on the audio only platform, leave us a rating and review. And remember to take advantage of your NordVPN discount. You can click the link in the podcast description box. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. One subscription can be used across 10 devices. Keep yourself safe while browsing on public Wi-Fi. Support the podcast at the same time. Thank you very much. And hopefully Newcastle upset the odds and can clinch victory against Manchester City.